there are icons. And then there is Michael Jackson, a figure whose influence didn't just reshape music, but permanently altered the way the world sees fashion, identity, and performance itself. Decades after his passing, his silhouette alone, a fedora tipped low, a single glittering glove catching the light, a military-style jacket commanding attention, remains instantly recognizable across continents, generations, and cultures. But here's the question that still echoes through fashion houses, music studios, and pop culture debates today. How did one artist turn clothing into a global language? How did stage outfits become symbols of power, rebellion, vulnerability, and transformation, all at once? Tonight, we're not just revisiting iconic looks. We're pulling back the curtain on a legacy that continues to shape modern fashion, influence global artists, and spark debate among critics and fans alike. From the streets of America to the runways of Paris, from music videos that changed history to cultural conversations still unfolding, this is the untold story of style as storytelling. And at the center of it all, the man who didn't just wear fashion, he became it. 2. Background and context, deep research style. To understand the style legacy of Michael Jackson, we have to go back to the beginning, long before the rhinestones, the military jackets, and the moonwalk became global symbols. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, as a child prodigy performing with the Jackson 5, Jackson's early image was carefully curated within the Motown system. Matching outfits, polished presentation, and coordinated choreography weren't just aesthetic choices. They were part of a broader strategy to position Black artists for mainstream American audiences during a time of cultural tension and racial division. Even at that early stage, style was never just about clothing. It was about access, perception, and power. As Jackson transitioned into his solo career in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the cultural landscape in the United States was shifting. The rise of music television, particularly MTV, created a new visual economy, one where image became just as important as sound. Artists were no longer just heard. They were seen, analyzed, and consumed visually. Jackson didn't just adapt to this new era. He defined it. When Thriller was released in 1982, it wasn't just a musical breakthrough. It was a cultural explosion. Music videos like Billie Jean and Thriller didn't just showcase choreography. They introduced a new kind of fashion storytelling. The red leather jacket, the black loafers, the white socks, these weren't random wardrobe choices. They were carefully constructed visual symbols designed to be instantly recognizable. Fashion historians often point to this period as a turning point, when pop stars became fashion icons in a way that transcended traditional boundaries. Jackson's style wasn't confined to one genre. It blended military influences, streetwear elements, theatrical flair, and high fashion detailing into something entirely new. And crucially, it was accessible. Fans didn't need a runway to participate. A single glove, a fedora, a red jacket. These became entry points into a global identity. But behind the spectacle, there was a deeper narrative unfolding, one that touched on race, fame, identity, and transformation in ways that still resonate today. The evolution of Michael Jackson's style can be traced through distinct eras, each marked by visual reinvention and cultural impact. In the early 1980s, during the rise of Thriller, Jackson introduced what would become one of the most iconic fashion statements in music history, the single sequined glove. According to those close to the production, the glove wasn't initially intended to become a global symbol, but under the bright lights of television performances, particularly the legendary Motown 25 performance, it became something else entirely. A beacon. It reflected light. It drew the eye. It transformed movement into spectacle. Then came the red leather jacket from Thriller. Bold, angular, and unmistakable. It merged horror aesthetics with street fashion in a way that had never been done before. It wasn't just a costume, it was a character. By the time Jackson entered the bad era in 1987, his style had taken on a more aggressive, urban edge. Leather jackets covered in buckles, zippers, and metallic details reflected a shift in tone, a harder, more defiant persona. This wasn't accidental. It aligned with the themes of the album and the cultural atmosphere of the late 1980s. In the 1990s, during the Dangerous and History eras, Jackson's fashion became even more theatrical and symbolic. Military-style jackets, gold armor-inspired outfits, and elaborate stage costumes signaled authority, vulnerability, and global ambition all at once. Each look told a story. Each era redefined expectations. And importantly, each transformation kept audiences watching. 4. Expert analysis. Why his style changed everything. Fashion experts, cultural critics, and music historians have long debated the significance of Jackson's style choices. But across disciplines, one consensus remains. He didn't just follow trends. He created a new framework. From a fashion perspective, Jackson blurred the lines between costume and couture. Designers began to recognize the power of performance, where, as a form of high fashion, theatrical elements, once confined to stage productions, began appearing on runways. From a media standpoint, his partnership with MTV redefined visual storytelling. Music videos became cinematic experiences, where wardrobe played a central role in narrative construction. From a cultural perspective, Jackson's style challenged traditional norms around masculinity. His use of makeup, jewelry, fitted silhouettes, and androgynous elements sparked conversations that continue in today's fashion industry. And from a business standpoint, his look became a brand. Merchandising tied to his image, jackets, gloves, hats, generated massive global demand. It was one of the earliest examples of a pop star's visual identity driving commercial success at scale. Even in today's digital age, the influence of Michael Jackson continues to dominate social media platforms. On apps like TikTok and Instagram, millions of users recreate his iconic looks, from the Billie Jean outfit to the smooth criminal suit. These aren't just nostalgic tributes. They're acts of cultural participation. Younger generations, many born after Jackson's peak, are discovering his style for the first time, often through viral content. And the reactions are strikingly similar to those from decades ago: fascination, admiration, and imitation. But the conversation isn't one-sided. There are debates about appropriation, about the commercialization of his image, and about how his legacy should be interpreted in a modern context. Some argue that his influence is so pervasive that it's impossible to separate contemporary pop fashion from his impact. Others suggest that the industry has yet to fully acknowledge just how transformative his contributions were. Either way, the conversation continues, and it's louder than ever. Looking ahead, the influence of Michael Jackson on fashion and performance shows no signs of slowing down. Major artists across genres, from pop to hip-hop, continue to draw inspiration from his aesthetic. Designers reference his silhouettes. Stylists study his visual strategies. Performers emulate his ability to turn clothing into storytelling. In many ways, Jackson set the blueprint for the modern global superstar, one who must be as visually compelling as they are musically talented. As technology evolves, with virtual performances, digital fashion, and augmented reality, the principles he established are being adapted in new ways. The idea that style can define an era, create identity, and drive global engagement remains as relevant as ever. 7. Emotional human angle. Why this still matters. For millions of fans around the world, the style of Michael Jackson is more than just fashion. It's memory. It's emotion. It's identity. People remember where they were when they first saw the moonwalk. They remember trying on a fedora for the first time, hoping to capture even a fraction of that magic. They remember feeling seen, inspired, empowered. In a world that often feels divided, Jackson's style created a shared visual language, one that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. And that's why it still matters. 8. Strong call to action, natural and professional. As we continue to explore the legacy of icons like Michael Jackson, the conversation doesn't end here. What do you think defines his greatest style moment? Was it the glove, the jacket, the transformation across eras? Join the discussion below, because history isn't just something we watch. It's something we interpret, debate, and carry forward. And if you're drawn to stories that go beyond headlines, that explore the deeper impact of culture, identity, and influence, consider subscribing. Because the next story might just change the way you see the world. As the conversation around Michael Jackson's style legacy deepens, we turn now to a simulated roundtable, a synthesis of documented expert perspectives, fashion historians, music critics, and stylists who have studied his influence for decades. This is where admiration meets analysis, and where legacy is examined under a sharper lens. The first voice comes from the world of high fashion, a veteran stylist who has worked across New York and Los Angeles editorial scenes. According to industry perspectives, Jackson's style wasn't just influential, it was disruptive. He challenged the hierarchy of fashion itself. At a time when runway dictated culture, Jackson flipped the equation. The stage became the runway, and suddenly millions were watching. Fashion, once gate-kept, became participatory. Another perspective emerges from music historians who point to the timing of Jackson's rise. The early 1980s marked a technological and cultural shift, the explosion of televised performance, the rise of global media distribution, and the increasing importance of visual identity. Jackson didn't just benefit from these changes. He anticipated them. Experts often note that Jackson treated every public appearance as a visual event. Whether it was a live performance, an award show, or a music video premiere, the wardrobe was never incidental. It was strategic. Then comes the cultural critic's voice, one that adds nuance to the discussion. While Jackson's style is widely celebrated, it also intersects with complex conversations about identity, transformation, and perception. His evolving appearance, both in fashion and physical presentation, has been the subject of intense public scrutiny. But what remains consistent, according to many analysts, is intent. Jackson understood the power of image in a way few artists ever have. He knew that clothing could communicate emotion before a single note was sung. 10. The psychology of style. Why his looks stay with us. To understand why the style of Michael Jackson continues to resonate, we have to go deeper into psychology. Human memory is visual. Studies in cognitive science suggest that people are more likely to remember images than words. Jackson's genius was in creating visuals that were simple enough to replicate, yet distinctive enough to be unforgettable. Think about it. A single glove, a tilted fedora, white socks against black shoes. These are not complex designs, but when combined with movement, with performance, they become symbols. Psychologists refer to this as iconic encoding. The brain attaches meaning to visual cues, especially when they are repeated in emotionally charged contexts. Jackson's performances were exactly that, emotionally charged, globally broadcast, and endlessly replayed. This is why decades later, a silhouette alone can trigger recognition. It's also why his style transcends language barriers. You don't need to understand English to understand a visual icon. Behind the artistry of Michael Jackson's style was something equally powerful: strategy. Industry analysts often point to Jackson as one of the earliest artists to fully monetize visual identity at a global scale. Long before influencer culture and brand partnerships dominated the entertainment industry, Jackson's image was already functioning as a commercial ecosystem. Replica jackets, signature gloves, branded hats, these weren't just souvenirs. They were extensions of identity. Fans weren't just buying merchandise. They were buying into a persona. This model would later be adopted and expanded by countless artists. Today, it's standard practice for musicians to launch fashion lines, collaborate with designers, and build lifestyle brands around their image. But in the 1980s and 1990s, this approach was still emerging. Jackson helped define it, and the numbers reflected that impact. His tours, particularly during the bad and dangerous eras, generated massive revenue not just from ticket sales, but from merchandise tied directly to his visual style. In many ways, he turned fashion into a parallel industry within music. The influence of Michael Jackson is not confined to history. It's alive in today's biggest stars. Artists like Beyoncé have paid direct tribute through performance styling, incorporating military-inspired jackets and choreography that echoes Jackson's precision. Chris Brown has openly cited Jackson as a primary influence, both in dance and fashion presentation. Even artists with distinct styles, such as The Weeknd, have drawn comparisons, particularly in the use of signature looks to define an era. The red suit phase of After Hours sparked widespread discussion about visual branding in music, a concept Jackson mastered decades earlier. And then there's Bruno Mars, whose stage presence, wardrobe choices, and performance energy often reflect a lineage that traces directly back to Jackson. What's striking is not just the imitation, it's the adaptation. Each of these artists has taken elements of Jackson's style philosophy and translated them into a modern context. The result is a cultural continuity that spans generations. As with any influential figure, the legacy of Michael Jackson has not been without controversy or debate. Media coverage over the years has oscillated between admiration and scrutiny. Fashion critics have praised his innovation, while some cultural commentators have questioned aspects of his evolving image and its broader implications. It's important to note that discussions around Jackson's legacy often extend beyond fashion into complex and sensitive areas. Responsible journalism requires acknowledging these conversations without conflating them with unverified claims. What remains clear, however, is that his impact on style is widely recognized across industries. Even critics who challenge certain aspects of his legacy often concede that his influence on visual culture is undeniable. One of the most remarkable aspects of Michael Jackson's style legacy is its global reach. In countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America, fans continue to emulate his look. Street performers recreate his outfits. Dance crews incorporate his style into routines. Tribute artists build entire careers around maintaining his visual identity. This global adoption speaks to something deeper than popularity. It reflects universality. Jackson's style was not tied to a single culture or tradition. It drew from multiple influences and synthesized them into something that felt both unique and inclusive. In a world increasingly defined by cultural exchange, this ability to transcend boundaries is more relevant than ever. 15. The art of reinvention. Why he never stood still. Perhaps the most defining characteristic of Michael Jackson's style was its constant evolution. He never stayed in one place. Each era brought a new visual identity, not as a rejection of the past, but as an expansion of it. This approach kept audiences engaged, curious, and invested. In today's fast-paced media environment, where trends change overnight, this lesson remains critical. Reinvention isn't optional. It's essential. And Jackson mastered it long before the digital age made it a necessity. 16. Building tension, the legacy question. As we move deeper into this discussion, one question continues to surface. Can anyone ever replicate what Michael Jackson achieved? The answer, according to most experts, is complicated. Technology has changed. Media has fragmented. Audiences are more diverse, more segmented, and more difficult to unify. But perhaps that's exactly what makes Jackson's legacy so powerful. He didn't just capture attention.